She walked into the wedding alone, her heels clicking like a countdown to Judgment Day. But what they didn't know was that this no-date girl wasn't just unattached, she was unstoppable. She couldn't even find a date. One cousin hissed, a little too loudly to be an accident. The other snorted, sipping her champagne like it fueled her cruelty. Of course not. Who'd want her? She peaked in high school. And that was a small hill to begin with. Laughter. Sharp, cold, and deliberate. My heels clicked across the stone tiles of the vineyard's courtyard like tiny stabs of defiance. I kept my chin up even as heads turned toward me, not in awe, but in pity, condescension, curiosity. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where you are from and which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what you would do in this situation. Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. My dress clung to me like confidence, sleek and black with a slit up the side. But none of that mattered to them. All they saw was a woman walking in alone to her Aunt Margot's opulent wedding. No ring on my hand. No one beside me. Just me. Eliza Mayfield, 31. Unattached, unwelcome. Figures, someone muttered behind me. Probably my uncle. The one who still called me pumpkin like I was 5 and clueless. I passed rows of white chairs tied with lilac sashes and headed straight for the reserve section. Every step felt like a negotiation. I could hear Aunt Margot's friends whispering behind manicured hands. I felt the smirk of my father's new wife, only 10 years older than me, burning into my back. And just when I sat down and reached for the chilled glass of water beside my chair, I heard it. Whump, wimp. A sound that didn't belong to string quartets or champagne flutes. It grew louder. Heads turned upward, confused, irritated. Then someone gasped. Is that a helicopter? Every neck craned toward the sky. And there it was, a matte black private helicopter slicing through the crisp California sky. It wasn't just arriving. It was descending straight toward the empty landing square next to the vineyard's fountain. I didn't move. I just stared straight ahead. The moment the skids hit the ground, the pilot jumped out, and seconds later, he stepped into the open. Custom-tailored navy suit, broad shoulders, sunglasses, hair tousled by the wind, but still controlled, and a jawline that made women lean forward involuntarily. My cousins were frozen mid-sip. One of them still held a cracker near her lips like she'd forgotten what to do with it. And then my husband walked past every stunned guest and straight toward me. He didn't even pause to acknowledge the gawking. He bent slightly, kissed my cheek, and murmured just loud enough for all those mouths to catch every syllable. Sorry, I'm late. The board meeting ran long. Something about your vineyard's expansion plans needing final sign-off. Guess that's your call now, Mrs. Mayfield. Gasps. Literal gasps. My cousin choked on her wine. My father went completely pale. Someone whispered, her vineyard. My husband straightened, his voice now clearly aimed at the crowd. You didn't tell them, love, that the land this whole wedding is hosted on is actually yours now. I gave the smallest smile, and the whispers turned into a collective roar of confusion and panic. The hush over the courtyard didn't last long. Aunt Margot's new husband, Ronald, a retired venture capitalist with a laugh like a lawnmower, tried to chuckle. Well, I suppose we're all learning new things today. But no one joined in because everyone's eyes were darting between me and the man who just kissed me and announced I own the land beneath their designer heels. Graham Mayfield, my husband, reached down and gently lifted my hand as if we were alone. In the room, his movements were tender, but the effect on the audience was thunderous. I could hear my cousin Ashley muttering, "That's Graham Mayfield. That's Graham freaking Mayfield. He's the guy who built Mayfield Aeronautics." Her sister hissed back. "He builds fighter jets." My father finally found his voice. "You're married?" His tone wasn't surprise. It was offense. I looked at him. "I am." "Since when?" My stepmother added, her mascaraed eyes scanning Graham like he was a hoax she hadn't prepared for since 6 months ago. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Someone else snapped. Graham answered instead, slipping his hand into the pocket of his coat. "Because your family made it very clear years ago that Eliza's achievements only mattered if they were visible, loud, and approved by them." He pulled out a manila folder and handed it to the event coordinator. "What's that?" Aunt Margot asked sharply. Already on edge. "Just a change of registration," he said smoothly. For insurance purposes, we had to update the ownership listing of the estate this morning. The entire property now falls under Eliza's holding company. You're all welcome to continue the celebration. My wife and I certainly wouldn't want to spoil the wedding. My holding company. I saw the words hit like punches. My dad blinked hard. You're not serious. I turned toward him. You disown me for not following your legacy plan, I said, voice even but hard. You told me I was a burden, that investing in me was a waste of family resources. You sneered when I applied to grad school. Do you remember what you said? He didn't answer. Graham supplied it. No man wants a woman with ambition and debt. The silence after that was so thick, you could have drowned in it. I turned my gaze toward my mother, who stood beside my father. She had remained quiet for years, complicit in every slight. I wasn't expecting a defense now. She met my eyes and then looked away. Typical. Later, when the guests were supposedly enjoying the sunset, I found Ashley and her sister in the vineyard garden whispering about me. She must have tricked him, probably got pregnant. Maybe she blackmailed him. She always was nosy. I stepped out from behind the stone column, my heels clicking loudly. They spun around. I didn't yell, didn't gloat. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through business school. You were both in Cabo on your parents' dime when I was learning how to split rent between for roommates. Ashley opened her mouth, but I cut her off. I graduated top of my class. Built a logistics startup that got acquired last year for $42 million. Graham was an investor. That's how we met. There's no trick, no scandal. Just me working harder than anyone here was willing to believe. They didn't speak. And for the record, I added, stepping closer. I didn't say anything until now because I didn't need to. I let that sit. Then I walked away. I thought the hardest part would be walking into that courtyard. I was wrong. The hardest part came an hour later, after the cake, after the forced toast, after Aunt Margot clinked her glass and pretended nothing monumental had happened on her big day. Because that's when he cornered me. Trent, my cousin, my father's godson, the one they always compared me to. He found me near the rose garden as I was trying to catch a breath, the air thick with jasmine and quiet rage. He approached with his signature smirk, the same one he wore when he stole my college recommendation letter from the mailbox senior year. I never proved it, but I always knew. Well, he said, swirling a bourbon like it made him worldly. Congrats on the theatrics. Very Netflix finale. I didn't respond. He stepped closer. But we both know what this is, don't we? I looked at him. What? This isn't about success or even love. It's revenge. You came back to make us squirm. Classic underdog stunt. You sound threatened. I replied calmly. He chuckled. Please, you're still the girl who cried in the basement after you weren't invited to prom. That stopped me. He knew exactly what he was doing, digging into wounds most of them had forgotten, but I still carried like splinters in my spine. You came back for one day, he sneered. We'll still be here tomorrow. Still connected. Still a family. You'll still be. What? Some rich guys plus one with no blood TIs. I inhaled slowly. Then I smiled. You're right. I'm not blood. That's why I had to be better. His face darkened. I didn't just buy this estate, Trent. I continued. I bought the debt your father secretly owes on the winery through a shell corp. Want to guess who the new lien holder is? He blinked. You're bluffing. Ask him, I said, turning my back on him. Ask him why he was whispering in the corner with Graham 15 minutes ago. Because I hadn't come here for recognition. I came here for leverage, and I had all of it now. Inside, the dance floor glowed under fairy lights, but no one was dancing. Conversations had turned hushed, nervous. Word was spreading like fire through dry brush. People were beginning to realize Eliza Mayfield, the quiet one, the no-date girl, was the financial spine of the entire venue they were standing on. And some were smart enough to do the math. If Eliza owned the land, she could end all of this with a single signature. My father found me again, this time without the bravado. Eliza, can we talk? Now you want to talk. I just want to understand. No, you want to control. I'm your father. You're the man who told me when I got into Columbia that I should apply to dental school instead so I could marry a stable guy. That was advice. That was fear, I said sharply. Fear that I'd outgrow you. He swallowed. So what now? I studied him. The lines in his face were deeper than I remembered. His voice wasn't commanding anymore, just small. Now, I repeated. Now I decide what kind of legacy I want to build. One that doesn't rely on cruelty to feel powerful. I looked around the courtyard. People were watching, listening. My aunts, the cousins who laughed, the ones who whispered. I'm not here to ruin your day, I said aloud. Not just him now. I came here because I wanted you to see that what you threw away, what you mocked, didn't break. It built. I stepped away from him, walked right onto the stage by the fountain. Then I picked up the microphone. The mic in my hand felt heavier than it should have. Or maybe it was the silence of 100 stares bearing down on me that made it feel like a weapon. I looked out across the courtyard. Gold lights flickered. In the overhead vines, wine glasses clinked faintly in stunned hands. No music played now. Just the humming drone of expectation. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't ask if they could hear me. They were already listening. Some of you laughed when I walked in alone. I began, voice even but strong. Some of you whispered that I couldn't get a date. That? I must be desperate, forgotten, irrelevant. Aunt Margot shifted in her chair. My cousin Ashley stopped chewing her olive. I heard you every word, and for a moment, it hurt. Not because it's true, but because it reminded me how little this family really knew me. No one moved. My whole life, I've been the girl you underestimate. The girl who didn't follow the plan. The girl who wasn't soft enough, polished enough, rich enough, quiet enough. You called me stubborn when I fought for myself, difficult when I disagreed, cold when I stopped showing up. I saw a few eyes drop. My stepmother looked like she wanted to evaporate into her champagne. But let me ask you something, I continued. Why was it so funny that I walked in alone? Why did it matter to you so much? A breeze rippled the sheer curtains tied to the tent poles. No one answered, because deep down, you wanted me to fail. You needed it. My failure would have made your comfort easier to swallow. My loneliness would have confirmed your belief that women who speak too loudly, dreamed big, and walk away from the way things are end up empty. My voice dropped, almost a whisper now. But I'm not empty. I turned and looked toward Graham, who was standing at the back, arms crossed, his expression unreadable but steady. I am married to a man who didn't save me, but stood beside me while I saved myself. I built a company from scratch, sold it, reinvested. I bought the land we're standing on, not to prove a point, but to protect something no one ever did for me, my worth. There it was. I could feel it now, the shift in the air. A few people blinked fast. One aunt subtly put her wine glass down. I stepped back from the mic, then paused. By the way, I added more softly, I'm not the only one you've silenced in this family. There are others, and I hope they see this as permission to stop letting you define them too. I walked off, and as I passed my father, who was standing rigid and pale, I didn't look at him, but I did say, you should really read the new lease agreement before tomorrow morning. 10 minutes later, I stood by the fountain with Graham. Guests hovered nearby, unsure whether to avoid me or apologize. He leaned in low enough for only me to hear. You didn't tell me you were going to say all that. I exhaled. Neither did I, he smiled. You okay? No, I whispered. But I'm finally seen. That's better. Then someone screamed. A loud thud followed, a wine glass shattering. We turned. It was Uncle Rob collapsing in the middle of the dance floor, clutching his chest. Eyes wide. People shouted. Chairs flew back. Someone dialed 911. The chaos erupted. And in the middle of it, Trent stood frozen. His face was in shock. It was guilt. Graham moved instinctively to help. But I didn't. I saw it then. The way Trent slipped something from his inner pocket and tucked it into his cuff. A bottle cap. A pill bottle cap. And my blood ran cold. Sirens split the quiet vineyard night. Red and white lights pulsed against the marble columns and wine barrels as paramedics rushed toward the dance floor. Uncle Rob was conscious, barely, being hoisted onto a stretcher with his shirt half open and his skin pale as parchment. People were panicking, scattering in every direction. But I didn't move because I hadn't taken my eyes off Trent. He stood at the edge of the chaos, hands stuffed into his tuxedo pockets, trying too hard to look shocked, but his fingers were twitching and his jaw was locked tight. Graham returned from helping the EMTs and slid up beside me. They think it was a reaction to his blood pressure meds, but the paramedics said something's off. I kept watching Trent. That's not just high blood pressure, I murmured. Graham frowned. You think he was poisoned or dosed with something that messed with his heart meds? Graham studied me. Eliza, you think your cousin tried to kill his own father? No, I said quietly. I think he tried to scare him, probably over control of the winery, but he got the dosage wrong. He always thought he was the smartest one in the room, but he's never had to live with consequences. Graham exhaled. Want me to step in? I shook my head. No, this one's mine. 10 minutes later, I found Trent behind the storage barn, pacing like a caged animal. The wind had picked up, and his hair was a mess. When he saw me, his mouth twitched. You really just had to ruin everything, didn't you? I stepped closer, boots crunching against gravel. You did that all by yourself. He barked a laugh. You have no proof. I don't need proof, I said softly. You already confessed. Not to me, but to Graham. He recorded your chat earlier when you bragged about how old men can't handle a little panic. He froze. I let it sink in. See, I whispered. You weren't subtle. You never are. You thought everyone here was so used to ignoring me. They'd ignore you too, but they don't ignore me anymore. And now they're watching you. He stepped forward, eyes narrowing. You going to turn me in? That's not who you are. I smiled. You really don't know who I am. And then I reached into my clutch and handed him a folded envelope. What's this? The transfer papers. Your dad signed over the winery to my holding company last week. Clean, legal, notarized. He was behind on taxes. You were going to inherit nothing. So, you tried to scare him into resigning everything, but you didn't know it was already gone. His hands shook as he opened it. Lies. Call the lawyer. I dare. You. He looked up, wild-eyed. You can't do this to me. You did it to yourself. Just like when you leaked my college application essay for a cheap laugh, or when you told your dad not to invite me to Grandma's last Christmas, or when you edited me out of Margot's wedding video on purpose. He threw the papers at my feet. You think this makes you powerful? Ruining me? No, I said, stepping back. This doesn't make me powerful. I looked him dead in the eye, but it makes me free. By morning, the headline spread. Aries silently takes over family vineyard after public wedding shocker. High society wedding interrupted by medical emergency and ownership bombshell. Guest stunned as mysterious husband arrives in helicopter. Declares land belongs to wife. People talked, gossiped, speculated, but I didn't read the comments. I didn't need their validation anymore. Instead, I walked barefoot across the same vineyard I used to be banished from. The morning dew soaking my toes, the sun warming my face. Graham handed me coffee on the balcony. You sure you want to keep it? I nodded. Yeah, but not for the family. I'm turning it into something else. A retreat for women like me. Girls they called too much. He smiled. You're more than enough. I leaned against him, quiet for a long beat. Then I said, you know what the hardest part of last night was? What? I never wanted revenge, I whispered. Not really. I wanted an apology. A single moment where one of them said, we were wrong, but it never came. Graham wrapped an arm around me. You didn't need it. I nodded. No, I just needed to see myself the way I do now and to walk away finally, not as someone they tolerated, but as someone they'll never forget.